What's going on, guys? My name is Bryan Gutierrez, and in today's video we're going to be talking about my marathon that took place on October 14th, 2023 in Hartford, Connecticut. So just to backtrack a little bit, I ended up prepping for this marathon race for about 18 weeks and had the pleasure of working with Coach Jeff Cunningham, who has coached a number of athletes and a number of elite runners. So throughout the build, I was able to learn what a proper marathon build consisted of, and it ended up working up to 6 runs a week and topping off anywhere between 60 to 70 miles a week towards the end of the prep. Fast forward to the night before the marathon. Unfortunately, I did not get a good night's rest, and that was because I had worked pretty late the night before. And then I also believe I had some race jitters and just pure excitement flowing through me because it was going to be my first marathon ever. And I didn't really know what to expect, being that my goal was to hit a sub 3-hour marathon for my first race. So I ended up only sleeping about 2.5 hours and waking up at 4:30 a.m. and having my breakfast, which consisted of a bagel with peanut butter, banana, some honey, and a cup of coffee. Right after that, I was able to luckily use the bathroom, which I was pretty happy about because, let's be honest, you don't want to have to use the bathroom during a marathon race. So after that, around like 7 o'clock, I got to the race area and was able to go into the VIP area, which was indoors, and warm up, put in my music, get into the right mindset, and just really focus on completing my goal at the race. After warming up for a little bit indoors, I was able to use the bathroom again one more time right before heading out to the start line at around 7:50 a.m. So as I made my way to the corral, I ended up taking in my first gel, and as soon as I got into the corral area, I took out my phone and started messaging my brother, who actually flew down from Florida to run the race with me. Now, when I say run the race with me, he didn't actually run side by side with me, but we had the whole plan of at least experiencing the start together. As soon as I found him, that really did provide extra motivation and just extra excitement to start the race. So about 5 minutes later, this race started at 8 a.m. Gun goes off. Immediately, I take off and make my way towards the right of the roadway just because I knew it would be easier from that point to weave in and around people that were moving at a slow pace. So for the first mile, that was pretty much my main objective, which is to try to create some distance between me and the slower runners so that it wouldn't mess up my goal of completing a sub 3-hour marathon. Now, being that that was my goal, if I were to evenly split the race, then I would have to hit an average pace of about 6:51 per minute mile for all 26.2 miles. So I was planning to come out for the first mile at a pretty conservative pace. But after completing it, I looked down at my watch and noticed I was hitting a 6:31 per minute mile. And I honestly felt so good and didn't even think that I was moving at that speed. So I really thought at that point, let's try and hold this for a little bit. So miles 2, 3, and 4, still hitting that same pace, relatively close to the same. And I ended up taking my first gel, or second gel technically, but my first gel throughout the race. And went down good. And from there on out, I was planning to take a gel every 4 to 5 miles. So I started continuing my way towards mile 5, clipping the same 6:30 round pace and still felt good. And at that point is when I really started to notice a gap between myself and other people, and I really started to set into a group of people that were also running a relatively same pace as I was. Out of that group of people, I met one guy named Nate, who I conversed with for the majority of my marathon race with. And it was actually a pretty nice experience to be able to talk with him, because going into this marathon, I thought I was just going to be focused and locked in and not really speak to anyone. But it didn't really work out that way, and it was really a nice experience to get my mind off the race. But at the same time, we were both still very focused on hitting our goal of a sub 3-hour marathon. So even though we were conversing throughout each mile we completed, we were yelling out our pace. And before we knew it, we got to mile 13, and we were both still hitting around a relatively good pace of a 6:30 per minute mile. So, and during that time, I was still really feeling really good, and so was he. And it was just kind of shocking to me a little bit, because while we were clipping away at these paces, we were holding conversation, and I was really starting to think a lot more like I can still keep holding this pace for the foreseeable few more miles. And this sub 3-hour marathon is quite within reach. At mile 13, I remember him even looking over to me and go, bro, we both just PR'd our half marathon time. We both came over the half marathon point at about an hour and 25 minutes. And prior to this race, my half marathon time, my best half marathon time was an hour and 28 minutes. So I was already beating that by about 3 minutes. So I knew that, okay, I'm still being able to talk while holding this pace. I can do more. So we kept hitting that pace for up until mile 16. And unfortunately around there, that's where Nate started to fall off and fall back. And I noticed that my time started to slow down just a little bit. I was hitting about 6:40 paces around then after that. And at that point, I started talking with another individual, and we got to talking about our running journeys as well. And at this point, we were both reaching uncharted territory of, reaching that 21-mile mark. They say that's where the marathon actually starts, and I had never done more than 21 miles prior to this marathon race. That was the longest distance I did throughout the build, so I really didn't know what to expect after mile 21. But I remember mile 22, I took my last gel and I could really start to feel my legs start to get sore, and it wasn't so much cramping, but I could tell that they were pretty fatigued. So taking that last gel, I was hoping would really help me out. And while clipping away at the next few more miles, I noticed that my legs were still relatively fatigued. And I remember looking down at my watch around mile 23 and noticing that I was hitting like a 7:30 pace, I believe. And I really started to kind of not be scared whether I was going to hit the sub-3 hour marathon, but because I knew I had banked a lot of time, but I didn't want to come in with like a close call of not completing that goal. So I picked it up a little bit more again as after mile 23, and for mile 24 I ended up hitting a 7:19 per minute mile pace. For mile 25, 7.13, and then again for mile 26, 7.31. So all in all, the last, I would say, 4 miles is where I noticed a pretty big dip in time. So I gotta say, I remember at the end there was part of it was like on the highway. I think it was like at mile 25, and I was like dead at that point, and it was going uphill, and I was just like, oh my gosh. And then I remember one guy like stopping and throwing up all over the place, and I'm like, well, at least I'm not at that point. But I kept pushing, and I made my way to mile 26.2, and I crossed the finish line at 2 hours, 56 minutes, and 19 seconds as a gun time. I ended up stopping my watch a little bit late just because after I was done, I was like in awe, and I was like, wow, I freaking actually did this thing. Like, all this training, everything paid off, and the excitement that I felt once I crossed the finish line was just completely indescribable. It was like the best feeling, the best high that I've ever had from any sport-related activity. And immediately after, I called my girlfriend. I started yelling, I did it, and called pretty much like everyone in my family. And it was really just a really rewarding experience, just knowing like all the time that I put into this marathon build, countless hours of running, and doing it while working a full-time job and working over maybe 50 to 60 hours a week with overtime, and still completing it and hitting this goal. It really opened my eyes to like showing like hard work pays off. And while obviously I already knew that, it was just another example of like, do the work and you can achieve your goals. So all in all, it was a great experience. I loved it. I already signed up for my next 2 marathons. I caught the bug, and my next marathon is going to be on January 28th in Clearwater, Florida. So I plan to hopefully PR. I really want to hit a sub 2:53 for that marathon. So we'll see how it works out. It all obviously depends on how well that day goes, how good the build goes, and obviously weather plays a big part in marathon day. So, and then after that, I ended up actually registering for Chicago Marathon for 2024, as the time in my Hartford Marathon qualified me a guaranteed entry into that marathon. So I'm just looking forward to getting better at running and just continuing to build off this marathon block. I'm still working with Coach Jeff Cunningham, so excited, very excited. I got a few more weeks left of this build, and I plan to hopefully document more of this one. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and until next time, I'll see you. Make sure you comment, like, subscribe. Peace.